Hello everyone, good morning, good evening, good afternoon from everywhere you are. I'm Mohsen from Microsoft Zero to Hero. I'm so happy to be here with another great session. That today's session is about the data, Microsoft Fabric, and Copilot. Before to kick off the main session, let me share some slide about the community with you. Let me add my slide here. Yeah, great. Today we have a Dominic here. He wants to talk about tracking Copilot for Microsoft 365 utilization with the Fabric. The topic, Microsoft Fabric Copilot, is a hot topic in the new technology in the Microsoft stack, and he's an expert data person. Before the session to start, in the backstage, I talk with Dominic. It's a great topic. He's a very expert. So you can learn more things from Dominic. And the next slide is about the Microsoft Learn community. As you know, Microsoft Zero to Hero is a part of Microsoft Learn community. We have a more than 7,000 member in the Microsoft Zero to Hero. We have a lot of session every week. All previous session hosted on our YouTube channel. Microsoft Learn community is a learn hub. You can select your learning path based off your role, based off your certificate. You can ask your question from a lot of Learn experts in the Microsoft Learn community. You can join aka.ms Microsoft Learn community. This is a Microsoft Zero to Hero April calendar. You can register now from the future session in the Microsoft Zero to Hero. Please follow us in our LinkedIn. You can stay tuned with a lot of news about the Microsoft future session or other programs we have planned in the Microsoft Zero to Hero. The last slide is our code of conduct. Be aware of others, be friendly and passionate, be welcoming and respectful, be open to all question and viewpoint, be understanding of different, be kind and consider to other in the chat, in the question. And the time is to add Dominic to a stage. Hello again. How are you?
I am great. How about yourself?
I'm fine, thank you. I see your topic. There is a fabric, there is a co-pilot. As you know, there is a great and hot topic and title in the technology, as you know. But all of us are waiting to study your presentation and learn more things from you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to dig in. So if you're good with it, let's get started.
Yeah, sure. You can add your slide or presentation on the
Right
stage.
there. I think
Okay, I add.
we're live, right?
Yeah, you are live. You can start with like,
Great. So thanks everyone that's joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at in the world. So excited to talk a little bit about this particular topic because, as stated earlier, Copilot and Fabric are very hot topics and for very different reasons. But what I love about this particular topic here today is that whether you're here because you're interested in Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 utilization, or you're interested in learning a little bit more about the complexities of what we could do with Microsoft Fabric, you're going to find something really cool here. What I love about this particular conversation here today is I'm really trying to bring a couple of different things together into one spot. So my focus here today is around utilization metrics around the Microsoft 365 platform, for example. But what I really like here is regardless of whether or not you're looking to use this for Copilot specifically, or maybe you're, for example, a security person that's looking to be able to look at endpoints around Intune or Defender, or maybe you're looking to be able to use some of the other Graph API endpoints, or maybe you're looking at the Power BI APIs, whatever it is, you're going to find a lot of the common themes and similarities here being covered here today. So I'm really excited to kind of dig through all of this all as a topic here today. So, really quick about myself, my name is Dominick Raimato. I like to say I'm a professional troublemaker, and really what I mean by that is that I really like trying push technology to the edges of its boundaries. I like doing cool things. I like really stretching the opportunities to really get the most out of our data and make better decisions as a result of it. I'm based out of the Northeast of the United States. I live just outside of New York City. You can see I've got a couple different ways you can connect with me here today. Notably, I will have some links available to you at the end of this presentation to help you get started with this particular topic because I know it's very complex. So I know some people like taking notes as they're going along, but fear not, I actually have a step-by-step guide for all of these pieces to be able to deploy something like this within your environment to make life a lot easier. So stay tuned at the end, but you can catch that on my blog there, datawithdom.com. I also recommend if you want to connect with me, you can either email me or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I always know after sessions like this, it sounds really great. I'm really excited. And then I get back to my desk on Monday morning to start working on something like this. And then I have questions or I run into roadblocks. So I'm always very accessible to the community. So if you have questions or you want to chat about some things around data or some ideas, please don't be afraid to reach out to me and connect through one of those different mediums there, whether it's through email or LinkedIn. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to go through here today and make sure we kind of level set. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're actually going to go through and we're going to we're going to understand a little bit about what Microsoft Graph is, how we're going to use it, how we're going to connect to it, and really how does that architecture lay out within the Microsoft Fabric environment. Normally, I like to guide people through the process and let them discover what it is, but there's so many moving pieces and complexities. I want to give you a really broad idea of what's going on across the board first, because once you understand that, it'll be easier for us to go through the creation of the assets within Microsoft Fabric and bring the data in. So once we've got that squared away, we're going to go ahead and prepare the lakehouse uh, to bring in our data. So once we've got that all set, we can actually go bring in our data, harvest it. So we'll actually go through and set the tables, create them, and make sure everything's ready to go. And then once that's in place, we'll actually go and build our connection to the data in Microsoft Graph using Microsoft Data Flows Gen 2. And then once we've ingested our data, we've brought it across, everything's ready to go. It's time to deploy our reporting solution. And when that is in place, we'll have everything ready to go that we can actually go and create, view our data within Power BI, and then actually go create other custom visualizations that we might want to use or metrics that are applicable to our organization. So what is Microsoft Graph? Because some of you might be asking, what is this Microsoft Graph thing that he's talking about? So Microsoft Graph is an API library for all different kinds of Microsoft services. So these are the APIs that a lot of organizations use to be able to create custom applications or integrations with different tools within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Is a very rich data connection point for us to be able to connect to. So there's a number of different endpoints that are available to us. They could do all different kinds of things. There's all different kinds of connectors available to us. So we have to go check that out and just really see what's available to us when we're using the tool. Like I said, we can integrate with different things. I know, for example, there's a lot of different tools that'll do things like create tasks in Planner, for example, or Microsoft To Do. Maybe it's sending emails. Maybe it's also posting messages in Teams. So it allows us to do a lot of that integration there. And then it also allows us to help us a little bit with security and compliance. I was actually talking about this earlier. One of the things that's often a challenge is organizations will sit there and they say, hey, we have 1,000 devices that are out of compliance, but which ones are the most important ones that we want to go after first? So we can use Graph to kind of help us understand what the ecosystem looks like and say, oh, here's the devices that have actually recently been active in the environment, but they're not compliant. The ones that maybe aren't active, we still need to address them, but there maybe aren't the first ones that I need to go fix and resolve. But most importantly, reporting is one of the most valuable pieces out of the Microsoft Graph solution that's available to us. There's a number of reporting API endpoints that are provided that allows to go pull information, and most of it around core Microsoft 365 collaboration tools. So That is a whole collection of different things that are available to us. Like, for example, in the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, we have a number of different things that we can go see. For example, we can see how many private chats were sent, how many channel messages have been sent. We can actually even scroll down below and we can see by username who's been sending messages and what kind of interaction we've had. So we can get some pretty detailed information available to us. We could do this through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center for both the different tools and the high level Admin Center, but we can also use it with some APIs. You'll see that the number of different tools that are available for us to report on out of the gate are different things like Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Viva Engage, also formerly known as Yammer, Outlook, and Copilot. And what's really cool when you actually look at this detail, you'll see things like, oh, you can actually not only just see by a user level what activity looks like, but we can actually look at things like which teams are in use, for example, or what devices are being used with teams. OneDrive, we can see utilization by OneDrive account. We can see SharePoint activity by individual sites. We can do it by Viva Engage groups. Outlook, we can look at it, mailbox utilization. So there's a lot of robust endpoints available to us to be able to capture this data and really make some great decisions around adoption, maybe retirement of teams that are out there or SharePoint sites that have been sitting out there for a long time, but maybe don't have activity. But there is a catch to how this all works, and it's a little frustrating. So the first thing that's a challenge here when it comes to the Graph API is there's a limited amount of available data to us. So if I want to get really granular data by day, that is only available to me for the last 30 days. I can then aggregate that in windows of, for example, 30, 60, 90, 120, or 180 days, but it's just the last 30, 60, 90, 100, 120, 180 days. I can't say, give me the last 30 days, and then the 30 days before that, and then the 30 days before that. So there's a little bit of a data availability window that's a real challenge that we have to start to think about. The next thing we have to think about when it comes to this is that there's some challenges when it comes to paging. And what do I mean by paging? So some of our API endpoints will pull back data for every record available to us. Well, other endpoints make us actually go through in pages. And what will happen is, for example, it will limit us to how many results we can bring back with each query. So, for example, the user's endpoint, which we'll take a look at here in a moment, only allows us to bring back the 1,000 users at a time. So if I only bring 1,000 users at a time, and I have 14,000 users, that means I actually have to do 14 queries to get that data. But I have to page through it in order to make sure I don't duplicate any data or miss any data. So we have to consider that paging component. And then lastly, we have to think about what our data inconsistency looks like. So one of the challenges with Graph is that data becomes available when Microsoft releases it. Now, we don't get this data ever in real time. That's a really important thing when it comes to the reporting endpoints. It's when it becomes available. Now, usually it's available within 2 days of the release, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes it's available 4 days ago, and then all of a sudden it comes up and it's 2 days. So we have to think through day by day how much data we're bringing through the pipe and how we're actually pulling it across and making sure that we don't have any inconsistencies with the data we're collecting. It becomes a real data quality issue at times, and we have to be aware of it. So when we're thinking about that, we have to consider how we're going to architect this data collection with Microsoft Fabric and how this is all going to come together. So we're going to start off here with our Graph API endpoints as the base. That's where we're going to go connect to get all of our data. And we have to get all the way across over to our Power BI reports because that's our data visualization layer. So Fabric's going to fit in between in the middle. We're going to use a lakehouse as our primary storage location. So we have to be able to get our data into that lakehouse to make sure that it's secure, stored and secured so that way we can start to use it. In order to create the tables we're going to use in the lakehouse, we're going to use a notebook inside of Fabric to generate all the content that we need and make sure that the tables are structured the way we want them. From there, the lakehouse has a semantic model that allows us to attach to with all the tables and things like that in place. So that's going to be ready to go with us. Once we've created the lakehouse, the model there, the tables, we're good to go. But we still have a gap. We still have to bring our data into the lakehouse. So to do that, we're going to use a Dataflow Gen 2 um, to bring that data in across. So we're going to use that to connect our API endpoints. We're going to do a little bit of transformation with that data, and then we're going to push it into the lakehouse. So then it's available with our semantic model and eventually into our visualization layer. It seems complicated, but I promise it's actually pretty simple. One thing that's really important for us to understand, though, is that data flow, there's a lot that's happening there. If I look at that last slide, it seems pretty simple, but there's a lot of pieces that we have to kind of think about that are going to happen in this process. So the first thing we are going to have to do in order for this all to work, because we're going to use application-based permissions in the Graph API with the service principal, we're going to have to do an OAuth 2 query to the API endpoint to get a token to provide our authentication. So what we'll do is we'll actually query enter ID for the service principal, which will then return my token that's available. Once I have that, I'm going to send that token over to the Graph API endpoint, and it's going to return, and it's going to bring back some data. And once that data is returned, we're going to actually do all of our transformations using Power Query inside of the data flow. And once that's in place, we'll go ahead and connect it to our lakehouse for storage, and we're going to go ahead and push it over into the lakehouse so that we can start to use it. So with all of that, I know I've done a lot of talking, but I want to move over into a live demo because everything we're seeing here, it sounds really great, but I want you to be able to see it in real time. So let me stop sharing this here for a second. Let me swap over. Give me one moment. Make sure I'm actually on the right. Here we go. All right, let me make sure I have the right one. This is it. Perfect. Okay. So what you'll see here is that I actually have a brand new workspace. I've gone ahead and created it. I've made it a Fabric premium workspace. So that means it's tied to a Fabric capacity that's already been put together. And it's brand new. There's nothing here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to walk through the process of getting everything set up and built from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new item. And the first thing I need to do is I need to add in a lake house. Now, there's different ways I can go. I can scroll down, look for it, things like that, but I can also just search for it up here. And we'll see, there it is. I want my plain old lake house. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it lake house. And we're just going to call it 0 to hero. So that way we have it, we know what it is. And we'll go ahead and click create. So we'll see here that we've got our new lake house created. And we'll see here under tables, there's nothing available to us. There's nothing under files as well. So I'm going to have to go and create some tables. I'm going to need to get some information in there. So there's a couple different ways I can do this, but one of the ways I really like being able to do it is I like creating it with a Fabric notebook. So if I go back to the workspace, I'm going to go ahead and create that using a notebook. And I have one that I've already created here. I can create one from scratch and put everything in, but I've got one available to you. And like I said, I've got links at the end of this that walk you through this entire process, including links to my Git repo that has this information. I'm going to go ahead and upload my notebook, and you'll see that it's available. And I'll click into it. Oh, that's interesting. There we go. Perfect. And thank you. Gotta love it when you get those pop-ups. So I'm going to actually connect this to our new to our lake house. I'm going to go add an existing lake house here. So I'm going to go grab my 0 to hero one. I'm just going to swap out this and get rid of that one because I don't need the one that I already have. And what you'll see here is I have a number of different cells available to me. So each one of these is going to do something a little different. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just go ahead and say run all to kind of get things moving so we can talk through it. But so that way it gets fired up here. But each cell here is getting ready to create our tables. And these are different tables that we're going to use to collect our data. Now, the first table here, you'll see I'm actually going and grabbing our team's user activity. So this is actually pulling back all the utilization metrics around Microsoft Teams. So you see here, I'm going and grabbing things like the last time the data was available to me, the user principal name of each individual user and record that's coming back. We'll be looking at activity, date, we'll look at message counts, whether it be private chats or Teams channels, calls, meeting schedules, all those different kinds of things. So we're bringing all that data in together. And you can see here, I'm setting the field name. You'll see that I'm setting the data type and whether or not it can be nulled or not. So this is data that's going to be bringing in that we'll put in and we'll set it up and we're going to set it as a Delta table. So that way we're in that Delta Parquet file format. And all this is being done in PySpark. Now, what's beautiful is if you're not really comfortable with this, you can use something like what I've got here as a code sample to start off, but you also have some Copilot that's available to you. So if you're not quite comfortable here, you can fire up your Copilot and use it to help you out. All right, we can see down here that everything went through, no problems here with the job. Keep going down. We can see the next table here we did for OneDrive, we did something for SharePoint, Viva Engage. Then what you'll see here is actually Copilot, we're doing it in two different ways, and you'll understand why here in a moment, because the way the data is being tracked in Copilot, it's being handled a little differently. And we'll talk about that variation, but we are using two different tables. One's going to just tell us the generic last activity data around Copilot, and then one's going to give us very specific Copilot data around different applications, whether it be Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. Then below that, we're actually going to create a table for our user information. So this solution is also going to pull in all of our users out of Entra ID and provide us with some dimensional data. This is really exciting because, for example, if you have a really clean environment that has clearly labeled departments, companies, office locations, this will make it really easy for us to group and analyze users together. So we'll have some dimensional data available to us. From there, we'll make sure that we have a date table in place that's ready to go. And then what we'll have here also is a licensing table. So this will allow us to provide additional filtering, allowing us to be able to look at people by maybe what type of license they have. So for example, if you're an organization that's really looking at users that are leveraging Copilot, that are using a more enterprise level license, or maybe like a E3, E5, or maybe if you're in a sovereign tenant like a G3, G5, or an education tenant of an A3, A5, we can filter that out versus somebody that's maybe using like a frontline license instead. And then lastly, we put together what we call our collaboration level. And this is just more for some visual reporting. So that's just being created and we're loading in some data that's available to us. And then we can actually just see there that that table is created. And then we have these three levels of collaboration available to us. So all this is being created for us inside of the lakehouse. And if we actually go here, you'll see that there's nothing there. But if I go ahead and hit refresh, we should start to see tables appearing. Perfect. If I go back to my lake house that I created, I, once again, don't see anything here, but hit refresh, and we can see that all of that is showing up. So we have our tables there. We can see that they're in the Delta Parquet format. We're in good shape. The other thing we'll see here is underneath my lake house is that I've created a couple of things. We've got my semantic model that's ready to go. That's all set, ready for us to connect to eventually with our Power BI report. And then we also have our SQL analytics endpoint as well, which we'll explore here more in a moment. So that's really the process here, high level, that we went through to set up the lakehouse. We've gone ahead, we deployed our lakehouse, We created our tables in the Delta Parquet format. We even preloaded a little bit of data for a couple of items, but everything's ready to go. We did that with a Fabric notebook. With that in place, the next step is that we want to go ahead and create a Gen 2 data flow that we're going to use. Now, if I go and create a new item and I search for data flow, you'll see here that there's a Gen 1 data flow and a Gen 2 data flow. What's the difference? Well, the Gen 1 data flow has been around for a long time, and it does a lot of the same things that the Gen 2 data flow performs. However, the Gen 2 data flow allows us to connect to the lakehouse and push our data into the tables that we're storing our data within. So we want to make sure that we're using a Gen 2 data flow for this whole project. So we'll select that. And you'll see here, by the way, that it is duplicated because there's a prepare data and get data section here, but it's still the same. You can click either one as long as it's the Gen 2 data flow. And we can give it a name. So I'll give it, DF there for data flow, and then 0 to hero. There we go. And we'll go ahead and click create. Now, once I've done this, I can start to connect to my data sources. So for example, I can go ahead and connect to different files, things like that. I can go look at some different sources. I could build a lot of stuff from scratch. However, I'm going to go ahead and use an existing Power Query template I have, just simply because we have a limited amount of time together. So I want to make sure we get through everything and make sure that everything is covered. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in my Power Query template, also available in my Git repo, so it's all set and ready for you. And then you can see here, I've got a number of different queries put together. I've got a lot of errors, and that's perfectly okay for now, and that's expected. So from your perspective, the big things I want to make sure that I cover with you here today is that a lot of everything you'll need to do to customize this in your own environment is really around these query parameters. I created them so that way when you create your service principal, you'll be able to actually just connect and put in your information. So you'll see here the application client ID, the application secret, and the tenant GUID, they're left blank for you to fill in. So you can just go ahead and swap that out and put that information in there. But I'm not going to go ahead and do this with my information because that would be a security risk, and it's being recorded and broadcasted here, on StreamYard and YouTube and LinkedIn. So I don't want to necessarily just throw that out there for everyone to be able to view. So I'm going to switch over into a different environment so you can start to see this in action. So give me 1 second to stop sharing this. And then let me switch over to the other workspace. All right. So you see here, I've got my query parameters and I've gone ahead and put some information in there. So I'm just simply using that. And that's going to be the core because I'm going to need that for my graph access token. This is going to be the most critical part of everything we're doing here today. This function is available to us. And what it does is it provides us with the authentication token that we're going to use every step of the way. So we want to make sure that we understand how that all works. So in the advanced editor here, we can actually zoom in here and take a look, and we can see I'm actually querying against this endpoint here. So it's the login.microsoft.com or microsoftonline.com endpoint. I'm actually using that tenant GUID that I use, and I'm going and grabbing my OAuth 2 token. Now, with that, it is a post request if you're familiar with API calls. So there has to be some information in the body. So I'm doing that with the content parameter here within the web contents function. And I'm going and grabbing and saying, hey, with the client credential, passing my app ID and my app secret. And then I'm doing it for the Graph API endpoint. So this is all going to bring back essentially my access token. That's going to be allowing us to authenticate against every endpoint that we want to based off the permissions we've allowed with the service principal. And it's going to allow us to do it without having to worry about our passwords expiring or having to PIM up for permissions or having to do anything special with two-factor authentication and refreshing that. So what we're going to do here is we can just simply invoke that function, and you'll see here it's going to bring back an access token, and that access token will allow us to query against an endpoint. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll actually use that against also our get users function, which will allow us to then also pull through our information. So you'll see here, I'm actually pulling against my end users within Entra ID. And what you'll see here, I've actually gone ahead and I'm using some of the OData query parameters. If you're not familiar with these, when you look at the documentation, and I link to all this documentation so you can take a look at it, but it tells us what fields we're looking for. This does two things for us. Number one, it efficiently brings back the data that we were looking for and we're interested in, so that way we don't have to have any excess data. It just kind of trims back what we're focused in on. But you'll notice here there's actually an expand parameter, and it allows me to pull back manager information. So traditionally, what I'd have to do is I'd actually have to do this in two queries, but because I'm expanding the manager parameter, I'm actually doing it in one. So I'm actually reducing the number of queries I need to make to the Graph API endpoint. That makes it a little bit more efficient for me. You'll also notice here that I have a top 900. That means because there's a limitation on how many users I can bring back at a single time in a query. So I'm using that to just simply restrict that. And then you can see here, I just got a little bit of code that goes through and just parses through that and brings back the results. So I've got this all set. I just need to make sure that I pass a access token there or an OAuth2 token, and we're good to go. So to do that in my graph users, my first step is I just pull in my access token, and then I go and use that result there to bring back that information. And you'll see here, right, there's my access token. I store to that value here, then use it with my get users function. And then I can start to convert everything out, expand out the values that I want. And then I can start to do some things like filtering and things of that nature. So one of the big things I did here was I made sure to filter out any inactive users. So just simply making sure that account enabled is true. I don't want any unenabled, unenabled accounts because I don't really care about them. If I'm looking for utilization reports, I should not see people that are not enabled in my report. From there, I actually then also created a date table. Now, this was one that I created from scratch. So I just simply said, hey, let's start off with listing out my dates. I started from January 1st, 2024, and then worked through there and just simply converted that into a date column, changed the type, and then just simply inserted different dimensional information I want to look at. So for example, if I want to look at year, month, day of the month name for a little bit more of a prettier report, but then also day name if I wanted to look at trends on utilization by specific days. So for example, if I wanted to look and see if people are using these tools on Saturdays and Sundays when maybe they're not working, I could do some of that analysis. And then lastly, I've got my licensing data that's available to me. And this just simply goes and grabs different pieces of information, just tells me what products are assigned to my users. So what I've done with all of this data essentially is I've gone ahead and created it and put it together. And what you'll see down here is under this data destination, I've tied it to my lakehouse. So if I click on this little gear here, you'll see that it actually goes and allows me to see the connection. So I've got it connected to my lakehouse. And then we'll start to go through here. There we go. So we can see that I'm connecting to an existing table, and these are the tables I created using the script that I showed you before. And you'll see that there's some data that's already loaded in there. And then what I can do here is I can say, what do I want to do? And what I can do is I can set the schema accordingly. So for example, I can just make sure that all of these items match. Due day, month name, and day name. There we go. Now you'll notice here that this didn't quite match up perfectly. And that's because the destination columns and the source columns don't match. Remember, all things with my when it comes to this kind of space here with Power Query, we want to see matching cases, things like that. So capitalization counts, spelling counts. The other thing you'll note here too is that my destination that I'm not allowed to use spaces in my columns. So I'm using underscores to make it a little easier to be able to view. Um, but it just simply makes it easier for people to be able to consume that information. The other thing here, I've got this set to actually replace. So anytime this data gets loaded into the lakehouse, it's going to delete what's there and it's going to replace with new data. Now I'm going to just simply hit cancel here because that's already mapped and ready to go. But all three of these tables here, we're always going to replace the data with fresh new data. Why are we doing that? Well, my user counts, I don't really care about users in the past. I'm looking at active current users. So we can go ahead and just refresh that table every time. It's not the end of the world. Same thing with licensing data. I'm not really concerned about users that maybe had a license removed. I want to look at who's got an active license today. And then lastly, when it comes to the date table, it's a pretty light table, so it's not a big deal. And I'm adding data, so I could probably make this a little bit more efficient. But because of the effort and the minimal amount of data that we're actually pulling in here, it's not the end of the world. So it's not a big piece here. So we're just simply going ahead and replacing. Well, let's go ahead and move over into our utilization tables here because that's where things start to change. So if I start with my Teams user activity table here, you'll see that I've got data, and you can see that I've got this report refresh date. And like I said, today that we're doing this recording here, it is 1:37 in the afternoon on March 29th on the East Coast here in the United States. So the last day data was available to me though was on the 25th. So 4 days ago. So like I said, this data is a little out of sync. So we've got a report refresh date here that shows us. But you'll notice here when I go look that this is the only date that's available because that's the last time data was available. And what I'm doing here with this actually is I'm actually pulling the last 30 days worth of data. We're going to do this and we're going to pull it for the last 30 days, and you'll see why here in a moment. But the idea here essentially is we wanted to be able to look at the last 30 days of utilization and understand what people are doing and how they're leveraging it. I then actually scroll out here. You can see my different messaging counts, call counts, things like that. So I can see some information. And then what I've done here, I've actually added some additional columns. So some of them are just letting me know, like, was something done, yes or no, in the last 30 days. But then we're also looking at things like calculations around how people are collaborating. So I'm looking at here and saying, hey, over the last 30 days, let's divide that by 4 to cover for 4 weeks, and then just kind of look at what's the average use of Copilot, and we're actually, or sorry, of Teams, and we're actually scoring that. And the idea here is to be able to see who's really using the tools a little better. So this is something I added in here. I worked with a colleague of mine, Kristen Hubler. She was the brains around what really defined individual team and what we call influencer level collaboration. And then bringing it together in a score, we just simply made it happen in the data here. So all this transformation is taking place for us behind the scenes. And then what I'm doing simply here is I'm going ahead and connecting it to my lakehouse. But what's being done differently here is instead of us just simply going and replacing it every time, because remember, I'm only getting the last 30 days worth of data for today, so we actually have this set to append. So this data is being added to the existing tables that are out there today. We're just simply adding it in as it's appropriate. Now, we're looking at the teams, the same thing's being done with OneDrive, SharePoint, Viva Engage. That same concept's being done. Last 30 days, we're putting a little bit of a score behind it, no big deal. But Copilot's being handled a little differently. And the reason is that the data is structured differently. Unfortunately, with Copilot, you'll see here, it's the same kind of concept here, but you'll notice that all of my activity is based off of dates. That's a little rough. I'm not getting counts. With the other endpoints, I could look and say, hey, how many private chats were being sent? How many meetings were being scheduled? I could look and see how many documents were being edited in OneDrive or even SharePoint, or how many posts were being made in Viva Engage. With Copilot, it just tells me the last time somebody used Copilot in OneNote, Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel, Word, Teams. That's not really helpful for me here. That's a really tough situation. So what's kind of a bummer here with this endpoint is that the data quality is not necessarily the best when it comes to analysis. Now, I do believe Microsoft is going to update this eventually. I don't know when it's going to be updated. I don't have that inside track to understand what they're going to do with their APIs. But in the meantime, if I want to start looking at how people are using Copilot over time, I have to get creative. So the idea here is if I could look at dates, that would really be helpful. So what I could start to do is I could look at this and I could say, hey, let's look at the last activity. And what I've done here is I've actually done a pivot. And what I've done here, I've gone ahead and created this last activity date. And this shows me the last time anyone used Copilot in any application. And then what I could do here is I could just simply give a label and say, was it used this week or was it not used recently? All that kind of fun stuff. Then the same concept here around Copilot data, but instead of it being about Copilot overall, I'm doing it for the different applications. Same concept here, doing a pivot and just putting it down the list and then just simply flagging it. Was it used or was it not in the last however many days? So the idea here essentially is to be able to start to track that information. Now you'll know here, by the way, too, is that my report refresh, even though my team's data was available on March 25th, my Copilot data is only actually available up to the 24th. Remember what I was talking about that inconsistency of data with the Graph API? This is a great example of it. So sometimes we're going to see gaps and holes in this data. But all this is still there. We'll do the same thing here. We'll connect to our lakehouse, and what we'll do is we'll pipe it in and append it to our data set. And once everything is all set and ready to go, we do have this option that we could publish later, but we're ready to go. So we'll go ahead and publish it now so we get that data refreshing. And what you'll see here is you'll get a little validation that's going to pop up here first. Yep, we'll see there it's going to validate the data flow, make sure that there's no errors, no issues. And then once that's done, it's going to go ahead and fire up a refresh. So if you see the little spinning wheel over here next to the name of the data flow, that's doing the validation. But then once we see it move over here next to the refresh, we know it's starting to do the refresh process. So while that's actually going, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at the SQL endpoint. Oh, there we go. It was published successfully. Now we're moving over to the refresh. We're good. So that's going to go ahead and run in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my SQL endpoint. And we're going to do a couple of things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go pop up the model layout. I've already done this because it takes time to do and all that kind of stuff. But you'll see here I've gone ahead and created my semantic model relationships. So graph users is really the central piece. And you'll see I've got a number of relationships going out to the different SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Viva Engage, user activities, my Copilot last activity, Copilot data, all that's there. Same thing with dates. So these are my dimensions that I'm going to use to filter out my data. And then also my licensing data filtering out my users. So it makes it really easy for me to be able to identify how I want to filter and look at my data. So all this is taking place here in the background and ready to go. Then once that is in place, I can start to go take a look at my schema here and just go take a look at my tables. For example, you see all my tables that are there. That's good. Maybe I'll go ahead and start a query and just start to see how what's coming back. So if I do a basic select statement using what I know from SQL, let's do Copilot data, and I can go ahead and run this. You'll see my data starting to populate. Oh, look at that. Even my data that just came in during that refresh is available. So that's perfect. So that data is now starting to come in and it's available to me. So I can create different queries and things like that. I can then turn them into views if I so choose to, things like that. So this allows me just to be able to go and view this data and analyze it as I need to. So I've got this all in place. I know my data is coming across. I've got my relationships built out, so everything's ready to go. So now that that's set, my refresh is completed. I've got one more thing I need to do before I start getting ready to do my reports is I just need to make sure I've got my refresh set up. So what I can do is I can go into my settings here for my data flow. I can jump down to my refresh. I can turn it on. And what I can do is I can set it to go weekly. I usually like doing Monday, and I set it to go off weekly at a consistent time. Now, you might be saying to me, Dominic, why aren't we doing this a data refresh weekly, or sorry, daily? The reason why we're choosing weekly is because remember how I said there was that inconsistency of that data? So if I'm looking to be able to look at the daily release of that data, I might not get what I'm looking for. If I start refreshing things daily, like I said, today's the 29th. My team's data was showing up on the 20 from the 25th. My Copilot data was showing up from the 24th. Well, I could get to tomorrow and do the refresh. And guess what? Both of them could be through the 27th. That means that I actually have a gap of the 26th on my team's reporting data. And for my Copilot data, I have a gap actually on the 25th and the 26th. So if I'm trying to do things on a daily basis, I might run into some issues. So I'm going to look at it just simply going through and doing on a weekly basis. So I can just tread things week over week. Is it the most ideal way to do things? No. I would agree with you. It is a little rough. It's not the perfect situation, but it does get us through some of the challenges that we have with this API endpoint. We just have to think creatively to make sure that we're getting through it. So maybe in the future, Microsoft will allow us to be able to do this on a daily basis. And if you're not really worried about the Copilot data specifically, I do have an article on my blog that actually goes through how you could go look at that data on a daily basis. And guess what? Also got the scripts, Power Query template, the Fabric notebook, all that stuff ready for you there. So you'll have some resources available if that's of importance. All right. So with all that said, we've got everything squared away, everything's set up and ready to go. So the only thing left to do is I need to connect this to a Power BI report. So what I've actually gone ahead and done is I've created a template file that's available for us. Now, I could just simply go in here and I could simply select my semantic model, and I can go ahead and explore this data. I could actually go and create a report off of this if I wanted to. With Copilot, you've got some options to just automatically generate content for us. But I have a Power BI desktop file that's actually ready to go that allows us to be able to connect to our data. So give me 1 second here to swap. Give me a second. And here we go. All right. So now you start to see here, I've got my data available to me. My data is coming through now. Perfect. And you'll see here that I've actually got it set up. If I actually go to the data source settings here, I can actually swap it between. So I could actually switch to the new lakehouse that we created, but I'm going to use this one because it's got some data available to me. But what we can start to see is we can start to see the trends of utilization. We can start to see who's using the tool recently, who has not used it recently, maybe who's used it 2 weeks ago, but not necessarily last week. So it allows us to show that week over week trend with Copilot. And then we can start to go look at some other information here. So for example, I've got information on, for example, active Copilot users. If it'll let me click on it, hold on here. There we go. I've got a list of active Copilot users. I've got inactive Copilot users. I've got OneDrive analytics available, Teams analytics. So I've got a lot of detail. And then also in here is, remember that collaboration score I was telling you about? That's available here. And unfortunately, my test tenant here that I have does not have any department information, but we can actually even trend it by department. So it allows me to be able to see what people are doing within the tool, but really easily allows me to bring this all together into a single pane of glass for me to be able to view and be able to consume. So once I'm ready, I can just simply publish that to the Power BI service, and I'm all set to go. So we'll go ahead and stop sharing here. Let me switch back over here because I got a couple things I want to just make sure I cover, because I make this look so easy sometimes, which is good, but there are some things we just need to think about as we go through this all together. So, common challenges that we really need to think about as we were going through this whole process. Data availability. I just showed you a couple of flaws in the data. You couldn't even plan it like that. I kind of wish I was recording this also on my side so I could just do a demo and show that live of the out of sync information between a couple of endpoints. Teams was on the 25th, Copilot was on the 24th. So that data availability is a challenge we have to think about. Paging requirements are also going to be difficult. Microsoft uses skip tokens. Some other organizations, their endpoints require you to actually do page counts, and then you have to skip pages. So you have to think through what that might look like. Data inconsistency, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Viva Engage gives me activity counts, but Copilot did not give me activity counts. So I have to think through that, how I'm going to navigate through that. Token authentication is a little difficult, I will say. When I first started doing it, it was extremely difficult. I finally gotten it down to it's pretty refined, that it's really easy to be able to do things like drop in a service principal, update my parameters, and I can start to reuse it. But that's something you'll have to think about as you go through. Keeping in mind too is that with some of these API endpoints, if you're using, for example, sovereign tenants, some of those things might be different. So make sure you're reviewing documentation, that there isn't anything that we have to make adjustments for or accommodate for, to make sure that you don't run aground on that. Some of this does require deep M knowledge. If you're not using the templates that I have put together for you, if you want to add additional templates, you have to think through a little bit of it. There's a lot of stuff once we get the data in that we can start to do the transformations with the visual graphical interface. But some of the commands and things like that you might have to write out by hand. And then obviously one of the biggest challenges that we run into with any API endpoint, whether it's Microsoft or anything, is bad documentation. Microsoft's documentation is pretty good. The some of the things like the expand and the manager is not something that was like really well documented when I first found it. It's been better documented today, but there are some things that are just kind of like you have to know it, unfortunately. So you might have to go look out on some different community forums and things of that nature to find some additional information. But just keep that in mind as you're looking through documentation. So some resources to know more. So these links here, I've got the links below there, but if you're using a mobile device, you can use your QR code. Copilot reports, that goes through all the details around Copilot reporting. So if you walk through the steps in the blog, that'll actually give you everything you need to know to be successful in order to actually deploy this exact solution as is in your tenant today. So you can go ahead and do that. The templates there, it's under open source use. So if you want to update it, use your own branding and colors and things like that, please feel free to do so. I also have a link here for my book. If you are new to Power Query or you're not really comfortable busting into that advanced editor and writing some code by hand, a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. I've got a lot of information on my blog, but my book actually walks you through some of those pieces. So that's something that's of value. I'm not the only one that has a book out there. I know, Gil Raviv has a really great one. Ken Pulls oh my gosh, last name's Escobar. I have to go. I owe that. I have to go look it up. But there's other great Power Query books that are out there. Just find something to help you out in that journey, because I think there's a lot of stuff that without having some of the context of how some of these functions work, the Microsoft documentation tells you how it works. A lot of these books that are out there help you walk through the process and understand how to best get the value out of it. So with that, I'm going to pause here. Questions? I know I've run through a whole lot of stuff.
Great, great. Thank you again, Dominic. It's a great session. There is a lot of topic you share with us, and I think the guys or other participants should be watch more than one times. It's a better to understand. And also your live demo in the practice hands-on experience. Because if you have any question, you can ask in the comment. If in the future, if you have any question, you can connect with Dominic in the LinkedIn email address. He shared it on the first of the session. You can connect to Dominic to ask any question in the future. Yeah,
There's my
again, you
contact
can.
information there also too, just in case.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, it seems that there is no question in the comment. We can close and end of the session at the moment.
It,
And thank, yeah,
I never know how to feel about that. It's either I explained it so well and so thoroughly that everyone gets it, or everyone is just like, "Oh my gosh, I need to watch it 5 times to capture all
yeah,
the pieces."
yeah, exactly, exactly. Thank you, Dominic, again, to have a great session with Microsoft Zero to Hero, and I hope to see you again in the future session with a new topic or other things.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me, and thanks so much for moderating.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Have a great session.
Thanks all.
Bye bye.
Bye.